Hello, you've tuned into State of South Asia, a podcast from Himal Southasian, where we have the best minds on the region to unpack crucial issues affecting our politics, cultures, environments, and societies. I'm your host, Nayantara Narayanan, coming to you this week from Kathmandu. On the 22nd of August, Colombo police arrested the former president of Sri Lanka, Ranil Wickremesinghe, over allegations that he used public funds on a 2-day personal visit to the United Kingdom in September 2023. Now, Sri Lanka's anti-corruption units have been very active since Anura Kumara Dissanayake came to power in September last year on a promise to fight corruption. More than a dozen political leaders from the previous government and former government officials have been arrested or are being investigated for corruption and malpractice. Wickfremesinghe's arrest is the most high-profile one yet. In the wake of his arrest, a number of politicians from his own party and from others in the opposition have rallied behind him, calling the case unfair and politically motivated. Marlon Ariyasinghe, a journalist and former editor at Himal Southasian, joins me from Colombo to talk about what this case against Wickfremesinghe signifies in the larger politics of Sri Lanka, what about its political culture has changed, and what remains stubbornly unchanging. Marlon, thanks for being here and welcome back to Himal as a guest on this podcast.
Hi, as you say, you never leave Himal, but yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, Marlon, I want to start by setting the stage, giving some context to these current events. Last year, in fact, almost exactly a year ago, Anura Kumara Dissanayake won the presidential election. His victory was seen as a break from decades of political corruption and nepotism that had really crippled Sri Lanka's institutions, that had crippled its economy. So there was a lot of hope at the time. Now, 1 year down the line, what is your sense of how people perceive this government and the overall political culture in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, and as you rightly pointed out, both Anura Kumara Dissanayaka's, or AKD as we call him, and NPP's comprehensive wins at the elections, they were historic. And it was a very clear paradigm shift and a clear break from the dominant political forces of this country. So yes, there was a lot of hope at that time, and this kind of appetite for systemic change. And right after the elections, I wrote this piece in which I argued like one of the major challenges that AKD and NPP will have is to manage voters' expectations, because we've seen similar movements and voter sentiments in the past. This hope, in 2015, for example, when Citizen and Wickfremesinghe established a joint government, there was so much of hope. And similarly in 2019 and 20 elections, when Gotabaya Rajapaksa won comprehensively, there was so much of positive energy, like good vibes all around, so much so that people were cleaning the streets and painting murals. So I think it's also something to do with one, how our political manifestos are drafted. Those things are a work of art, like they're genre bending, there's sci-fi in it, there's fantasy, and of course most of it is fictional. And someone should definitely do like a study on those. Because political parties, they promise everything under the sun, and also more to voters. So they sell this kind of utopian reality, and and of course, you are giving a lot of hopes to people who are coming out to the polls. Then I also think the office of the executive presidency, that's also another major problem, because that also gives this sense of larger than life, this kind of messianic figure, often a man, who will come to save us all.
Like comparable to the US president, that huge figure in politics.
Quite comparable, but I think when it comes to the US system, because of the systems and like the accountability systems that are in place, they do work as a check on the president. So there's a slight difference in the way that, I mean, of course they can be compared, but there's a slight difference in the way that it manifests in Sri Lankan culture. So I also feel that that is another another problem, because these administrations of 2015 and 2020 that I alluded to, it was within the like within the first year in office, voters became highly disillusioned. Of course there were major blunders, but the mood very quickly shifted within that year. So when it comes to the NPP, people who, or those who voted for NPP, they had a lot of hope. I mean, they still haven't completed 1 year, and there have been a lot of missteps as well. And but I don't think they have lost the voter base as of yet. So, I've been traveling around Sri Lanka the last few months, and from what I'm sensing, I'm generalizing, of course, and from what I'm hearing, is that like the economic situation is still the same from last year. With the austerity measures, life is quite difficult. But they still are counting on the government. But this can change, very quickly. Especially in this age of social media. We saw this in again in 2015 and 2019, that social media has so much power to to impact, to influence public sentiment. So if something major were to happen, all of this can change quite quite dramatically. So I think for NPP in 2025, I think I would give them like a B minus. Since yesterday our central bank governor received an A grade. So in that spirit, I would give the NPP a B minus, I think. Yeah.
And, of course, Dissanayake and the NPP rode that wave of sentiment of the Aragalaya, and a
Yeah.
large part of that protest was really against corruption. In this context, the context that you have set up is the one in which Ranil Wickremesinghe has now been arrested. I want to ask you what you make of these charges, simply because there are far more serious allegations against him, such as his possible involvement, or at least his knowledge of the Batalanda torture site during the JVP insurrection in the 1980s. Compared to those kind of allegations, reports have come out suggesting that there are far more serious things he's been involved in. This is a fairly minor charge. How do you see this?
Yeah, and I think what you said just now has been articulated by many actors and by the public within the last week. But the case that we have at hand is quite narrow. It's concrete. It's also politically resonant, because allegedly, or the alleged misuse of public funds. It's about 16.6 million, which is like roughly around $50,000 of funds that were misappropriated for this trip to the UK in I think in 2023 for a 10-person delegation. So in a country that is still holding itself out of bankruptcy, uh, that number that lands, and he was arrested on the 22nd, and he was quickly remanded and then admitted to hospital. Then he went into the ICU, and now this week he received bail. So in my opinion, misappropriation of taxpayer money is a crime. But it's obviously not up to me, but the courts to decide that. And this is also an allegation, right? And it has also it has become this like highly divisive issue. And there have been, I think, very perceptive arguments, legal arguments that have been already made from different sides. For example, there's this conversation of how or what constitutes private and public for an executive president. Again, if this office did not exist and if it was abolished, we would not be having this conversation. But so there are lots of nuanced and complex arguments, and I think right now it's up to the judiciary, and we will kind of watch with great interest of how this kind of case moves forward. Now, about you mentioned Batalanda, right? About the Batalanda, the allegations, and I think the commission report is available online to read. And the report alleges that Wickremesinghe was aware of the torture chambers and the unlawful detentions by police at Batalanda. And there, he also maintained a staffed bungalow and stayed there. So again, I don't want to comment on it because the report is available for people to read. It's also worth noting that during the Easter attacks, Ranil Wickremesinghe, who was the prime minister at that time, was originally named as a defendant in every case. But he was, these cases were dropped in July 2022 when he became president, because, executive president, like in the US, you alluded to before, it carries prosecution immunity. So there are many allegations, but nothing nothing has been proven as of yet.
Right. And I guess for people thinking along those lines, hey, they got Al Capone on tax evasion, right?
Right.
So in March this year, the journalist, writer, and founder of the International Truth and Justice Project, Francis Harrison, wrote an article in Himal about Wickremesinge being in the hot seat. He had just given an Al Jazeera interview where he was confronted with questions about his role in Batalanda and the lack of accountability for torture, disappearances, and human rights abuses more than 30 years after they've occurred. You can read that piece and more on Sri Lanka's politics, including a detailed profile of Wickremesinge, on our website, himalmag.com. Himal brings you stories from across South Asia that you won't find anywhere else. It takes a lot to do this kind of in-depth, independent journalism, and we rely on listeners like you. You can support the magazine by becoming a paying patron. Click on the link in the episode notes or go to our website and click Support Himal. You can also sign up to our newsletters to keep up with our stories, events, and more. Now back to our conversation with Marlon Ariyasinghe. Marlon, does Wickremesinghe's arrest in any way indicate the Dissanayake government's willingness to uphold the reforms it promised, the ones against corruption? Or is this a fig leaf to cover what they cannot or will not push through?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, because now we've seen in the last few months there have been like a lot of high-profile arrests and cases, like the removal of Deshabandhu Tennakon as the Inspector General of Police for abuse of power and misconduct. Then there's Sashendra Rajapaksha, who was arrested for corruption. Then a former minister, Kehelia Ramokwella, for money laundering. Then the Fishery Harbors Corporation Chair, Upali Liyanage, for financial misconduct. And then just yesterday, we had a few major arrests. Former State Minister Nimal Lansa was remanded on assault charges. Former MP Aturulia Ratanathera was remanded, and as well as former Minister Rajitha Senaratne. So there were, and also adding to that, there were high-profile convictions. One of the ex-minister Mahindananda Alutgamage, and also the North Central Province Chief Minister Ranjit Samarapun. So a lot of things have been happening, and clearly with Wickremesinghe's arrest, um, you can see there's a touch of theatricality to the whole thing, and all of this is quite dramatic. And we always we I mean I've kind of mentioned that this in the article as well. We need to remember that the NPP is led by the JVP, which is a political party who also leans into theatricality at times. But when it comes to this Wickremesinghe's arrest, frankly, myself, I find it a bit tedious, and I think people also find it a bit tiring. And even as like as a former journalist or a journalist, it's very difficult to keep up with all these arrests, because there's so many that is happening at any given time. So I think the NPP is, and we'll probably talk about the opposition in a minute, but the NPP is resorting to existing political strategies, the fireworks and the distractions. And we've seen these arrests come and go in Sri Lankan politics. And, the conviction, and if there are convictions, great. But, they still have 4 years, and 4 years is a long time, and water patience is finite. So as long as they deliver on their promises of reform, it's fine to kind of, I guess, sprinkle some of these like theatrics into it. But I don't think it's really impressing a lot of people. And I think that's the kind of read that I've been getting. And frankly, I am a bit tired of it as well.
Sure. Of course, you wrote a piece for Himal just this week on Wickremesinghe's arrest, and You've criticized the way many politicians of Sri Lanka's opposition have reacted. They've been rallying to support Wickremesinghe, and as you say in your piece, they've been resorting to grandstanding instead of pushing for real political reform. Tell us about this reaction and how Wickremesinghe's arrest has kind of united this opposition in support of him.
Exactly, and I guess that's basically what I wrote in my article, and I actually wanted to write about the opposition and not just the SJB, who is the main opposition party, Samagi Jana Balawegaya, led by Sajith Premadasa, who is the opposition leader. So I didn't just want to focus on just like the opposition, but the oppositional forces, like you rightly said, who all came together in solidarity with Ranil Wickremesinghe. And I think for most people in Sri Lanka, seeing all of them come together was farcical at best and infuriating at worst. Because some of these parties who are there, some of the people who were there, who belong to this political class, they have in the past called for Ranil's arrest, not just once but many times. So seeing them all kind of come together with Sajid Premadasa and SJB also in this mix was quite revealing, I feel, and quite revealing of this backroom political deals. How elitist and self-serving, how incestuous this political class is. A friend also told me that when they come forward to protect Ranil, they're protecting themselves. Because with these arrests that are happening, which is a great number, the political class is more than ruffled. So there is this underlying anxiety and fear. So this this whole spectacle, it also kind of reminded me, I think, for a lot of people also, there's this quote by a former minister, Ranjan Ramanayake, who said in Sinhala, "Me okkoma yaluwa malli," which means basically they're all friends. All of this, this old and old friends as well. And I'm huge fan of that phrase. Not a huge fan of Ranjan, but that phrase, I think it really captures, it perfectly kind of encapsulates Sri Lankan politics and our political culture. So there were press conferences and there was a protest that was organized. And if you look at that protest, it was not very well attended. There was not a lot of people. So in my opinion, these oppositional forces, they kind of exposed themselves and exposed how weak they were in the face of this government, who has a supermajority in the parliament. And that's one of the reasons what kind of led me to write the article, because um, the current political culture, and I think especially the post Aragalaya political culture, I think has changed. And I've been having a lot of debates, with my friends who are political analysts about this, and they're slightly concerned at my sunny disposition. Like that I believe that the political culture has changed, but I think when you look at some of these things that have been happening in the last few months, and especially what happened within the last week, we are seeing how the culture is changing in real time. And I feel that the opposition and all these oppositional forces, they are not attuned to what is happening on the ground. And I feel it's not just the opposition. I think even the NPP government, because the way that they're kind of if you look at their communication, the way that they're kind of handling themselves, I think they're also resorting to these old strategies, because they also need to kind of cover up some of the missteps that have happened within this year, and also to some of these missteps have we can clearly say that it was due to their inexperience in governance that some of these missteps were made in the first place. So they need to kind of cover that, and they have never governed before, and that also shows. So that's what I think. That's why I think that the opposition, they need to change. They have to be this kind of formidable force that can push the government in the right direction, towards much needed, and these promised reforms. But right now, I don't think the opposition or the oppositional forces as a whole, they are doing that, and they really do need to change and evolve within the next 4 years, because You are dealing with a government that has a supermajority, which means it's very difficult to oppose them within the parliament. So you need to really, I mean, an opposition will really need to be very clear and coherent in their communication, and they need to also, rally and get the people in their side. So I really do feel that they need to. That they haven't really been attuned to what the changes that have been happening, and that they do need to change within the 4 years. If not, the NPP will once again will come, will command another supermajority in the next government.
Right. And, on this podcast, just after Dissanayaka's victory, I spoke to Ambika Satkunanathan, and she had pointed out this very thing that the NPP hadn't governed before, their lack of experience, but also the fact that Dissanayaka himself said that he was willing to listen to people who had that experience, who knew, who were experts in the areas that they were looking at. Do you feel that that has happened, or what is your sense?
Yeah, I think the recent education proposal is a very good kind of yardstick to look at how they, because there I think it was one, the inexperience showed. Two, it showed that there was a very clear communication gap, that they were not able to articulate what they want to the public and also to the experts, as you said. And they've not really recruited and gone, hand in hand with expertise that is available. Because there was a lot of questions about the education bill. I'm just bringing that up because that's like one of the recent examples. Uh, there was a lot of questions that were posed to the government and also to Prime Minister Harini Amarasuri, who's leading that project, about the education bill. And there was most of the responses were quite vague, and we still haven't. I think recently, I just I think in the morning there was something, an update on it. I can't remember what it was, but I think that at this point there's no draft. So the education bill was, I think, a very good litmus test to the way that this government operates and the kind of inexperience that this government showed within its first year. Of course, they still have time to, to kind of come up with a clear strategy of communicating this policy to the people, but not just the people, but all the stakeholders who are involved in this. Now, if you take the education policy, you have you need to communicate with the education union, the unions, right? Then the teachers, then all these other stakeholders, academics who are involved in education policy, then government actors, government institutes. So all these stakeholders have to be clearly aware of what this bill is going to be about, and they need to have a draft of the bill in order to even come up with to make sense of what will happen. So I agree with Ms. Satkunanathan in which they came in saying that yes, they are going to use all the expertise. But what I'm hearing from the ground, from other people who are hoping to be an asset to this government, that there is a little bit of arrogance that is also creeping in to this administration, which I think this is what happens when you give when you have power and when you have a supermajority. I think there is that kind of those sentiments that they will not be as willing to listen to experts as they. I mean, again, I'm speculating. I'm speculating from the things that I've heard. So I think again these things um, are not great signs, because they are because we've had governments that were very tone deaf to the needs of the people, very tone deaf to the unions, and not just the unions but also civil society and experts. So and they've come and gone. So Sri Lanka has kind of experienced this before. I mean, I obviously don't want to kind of sensationalize what is happening right now, but there could be because 4 years is a long time. There is opportunity for them to change and grow and take the whole country and these different stakeholders with them. But there's also an opportunity. I mean, there's also a very real possibility that they alienate most of these stakeholders and they lose the election in the next. I mean, I don't see that happening, but that's also is a possibility.
So they certainly have the time, it's up to them to use it. Marlon, I want to go back to the protests for a moment and the optics of the protests, actually. I believe that the people who had come out in support of Wickremesinghe against his arrest, they've even co-opted slogans from the Aragalaya, which is really ironic. Tell us about what these protests looked and sounded like.
Yeah, so I think that again, going back to what I said before, when we saw these oppositional forces coming together, one, because it was poorly attended, there was a lot of, jokes that were being shared across social media, memes that were shared, and so there was a lot of ridiculing also that was going on, and there was also a lot of grandstanding from the political opposition that was going on at the same time. So there was a lot of things that were happening at that time. So it was quite theatrical, but at the same time, like I said before, it looked farcical because they were trying to, as you said, co-opt some of the slogans, some of the chants, but they don't have the same effect because the Aragalaya is something that came out of the people, came out of the people organically, and it came after decades of frustration. It's not something that just happened. It happened over decades of experiencing this kind of political malignancy that our political class has kind of perpetuated with subsequent governments. So that frustration was a decade-old frustration that came out, and then it kind of translated into these slogans, into these chants, and so that kind of thing. That's why it felt a bit of a like a cop out in the sense that they are resorting to these slogans, but the meaning of those slogans was not there because it was basically engineered. It was used in that particular context, which probably it didn't, for me at least, it didn't make sense. So I don't think that translated well at all because I think one I saw there was this Anura Go Gama because famously during the 2022 protest there was a Gota Go Gama, Gota Go village that was established in Colombo. And like for a gamma, you need to have people. You can't have like four people and have a village. So yeah, it was a bit ridiculous also how they were kind of using the same slogans. But because people, although we do have short-term memory, people do remember the Aragale. People do remember what they felt during the Aragale when they were using these slogans and using these chants. So that I felt was a bit of a bit of a mismatch, and they kind of missed the point a little and kind of opened themselves up again. Like I said before, like they exposed themselves to the people and exposed themselves to ridicule as well.
Right. So, as you mentioned, Wickremesinghe has now got bail. From your years of watching Sri Lanka's politics, how do you anticipate this whole thing going forward? What do you think might happen now?
Yeah, I mean that's the million-dollar question, right? You can have decades, you can be looking at Sri Lankan politics, and it's so difficult to predict. And because right now we are in these like uncharted territories. A president has never been arrested in Sri Lanka before, so this is a historic first. So how these kind of institutions that we hold dear as democratic institutions respond to this, the judiciary, the legislative institutions, and as well as the civil society and the people. So it's very difficult to predict what will happen within the next months or even years because we have seen this. I mean, we haven't seen a president getting arrested, but we have seen political actors being arrested before and being released and being kind of cleared of all charges before. So that's also, we have that kind of trauma that the past administrations have kind of inflicted on us. So it's very difficult. So this is why I kind of mentioned that my friends tell me that I'm being very optimistic. It's difficult for people to be optimistic because they've seen these theatrics before. But I have a feeling the charges may not result in a conviction. But again, I'm genuinely unsure of how this would play out. But we will all be watching with great interest. Yeah.
Sure. Of course, the other thing, one of the latest developments is that the police have gone after the protesters who came out in support of Wickremesinghe. They had been, basically asking for him to be granted bail, and which the police have claimed is contempt of court. Does this seem a bit excessive to you? Also, maybe it's not that significant, but are you at all worried that if the administration takes this stance, it doesn't really bode well for legitimate protests in the future?
Yeah, I mean that's again, this is like a very recent development. I think it was yesterday when the IGP had a press conference, and uh, there were kind of rumblings about it, but then I think yesterday we got to know the kind of whole scope of this. It was actually the court or the magistrate who had ordered the police to use surveillance, to use photos, and to see if I mean, if, to kind of arrest protesters who have obstructed, I think, the dispensation of justice at that point, or obstructed police duties, and also obstructed the road. Also, I think. So this is a very new development that is happening, and it's been communicated by the court. And that it could be seen as contempt of court, because I think the IGP said you can't protest asking for bail, and that that's what he mentioned when he kind of said, oh, this could be framed as the contempt of court. So yeah, for me, I feel I'm a bit worried, because as farcical, entertaining these protests were, I feel they were that they should have the right to protest. That and again, I was kind of reminded, because some of the language that was used by the IGP reminded me of how, time and time again during the Aragale time, how protesters were arrested, using these like obstruction of justice, blocking private roads, occupying state building, all of these, like they were using footage from social media, photos from social media, to arrest protesters. And really, there was a witch hunt that was kind of that was implemented by the Ranil Wickremesinghe administration at that time. So yeah, I don't really see this as a great development, because I feel that if people do want to protest, yes, they can't obstruct justice, but if they want to protest uh, the arrest of Wickremesinghe, I think they should be allowed to do so. But again, since these matters are all very kind of judiciary bound, and so it's very difficult to kind of to comment on it also. So, but yeah, but I do believe that this it felt like the the police forces have kind of taken up the court's mandate, and they're kind of overextending a little bit. That's what I felt when listening to that press conference. So yeah.
Right. Well, Marlon, my final question, can you give us three recommendations? This can be something to read, books, articles, or even movies or podcasts to basically explain to our listeners, help them understand better the current state of politics in Sri Lanka.
Okay. I mean, we could actually ask Ranil, because Ranil has been reading Boris Johnson's Unleashed at the ICU. There was a picture of him. So I mean, I would say stay away from that. Stay away from Boris Johnson's Unleashed. And I would also stay away from most of the Sri Lankan podcasts, unless you want to do like a deep dive into Sri Lankan manosphere. Okay. Oh, I recently watched Rani, Ashoka Handagama's film Rani. I think that would be a very kind of a nice intro into how Sri Lankan politics work. Um, so that would be definitely a recommendation. Um, Books, well, you can't go wrong with like Shehan's Seven Moons, um, and Sugi's Brotherless Night. Then,
Yes.
if you want, since I'm also kind of a scholar, maybe Sharika Tiranagama's In My Mother's House. Uh, yeah, I mean, these are some of the, you can't go wrong with those books. You didn't ask me about a play. I'm so let me okay, even if you didn't ask me, I'm gonna give you a recommendation. These days in Sri Lanka, there's a Suddek Oba Amatai by Udesiri Wickremesinghe is being kind of doing its rounds in Sri Lanka again. So that's also another, if you are in Sri Lanka, that's another great play too, if you want to kind of get a sense of how Sri Lankan politics work. There's a lot of humor in that, yeah. So yeah.
Marlon, thank you so much. It was great having you on the podcast today. Thanks for bringing us up to speed with all these events. And yes, maybe we'll have you back at some point.
Thank you so much. I would love to be back. Thank you.
That was Marlon Ariyasinghe on the State of South Asia podcast. You can find more Himal stories and analysis from Sri Lanka on our website himalmag.com. You can read Francis Harrison's piece on the Battle Under Torture site and Tisarani Gunasekara's profile of Ranil Wickremesinghe, and also Marlon's piece on Wickremesinghe's arrest and Marlon's old stories on Himal as well. If you like this episode, leave us a comment or write to us at editorial@himalmag.com. Tell us what you want to hear about on this podcast. Don't forget to tune in to the South Asia Review of Books podcast with Himal's Shweta Srikanthan. And all 12 episodes of our special podcast series Partitions of the Heart, hosted by the peace activist Harsh Mandar, are now up on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. You don't want to miss out on this great and essential set of conversations on the crisis of Muslims in India. Follow the Himal South Asian podcast channel on your podcast app to find all our latest episodes, and you can share, rate, and review them. You can also sign up for our newsletters to keep up with Himal's work. This episode was edited by Ritika Chauhan. We'll be back soon with another in-depth conversation on the next episode of State of South Asia with me, Nentara Narayanan. Thank you for listening, and see you then.